Welcome to the Sales Mindset Podcast. We talk about all things within sales and having the right mindset. Brian, you wanted to talk about an experience today.
Yes, that just happened actually, just basically on my way over here.
Yeah.
So I went and got a haircut.
I'm very jealous.
The new do. Yeah. I think yours looks really good.
Thank you.
You have a really good barber.
Thank you.
I think. Yeah.
I'll let them know.
You ever see anybody about the beard?
I do actually every now and then. I'll get
really?
a good beard trim, but I usually do it myself.
Yeah. I've honestly never understood that as somebody who, I could grow facial hair if I wanted to, but let's just pretend as though I couldn't.
Okay.
Yeah. I've always just done it myself,
There's a certain, I think, guilty pleasure in having someone else trim the beard. Plus,
Yeah.
it's nice to get them to see if there's a better shape that can go with it.
Yeah. Well, on the topic of the haircut,
Mhm.
I went into, it's just a Great Clips. It's a woman named Kelly at Great Clips who cuts my hair. But I just kind of over time built a relationship with her. I went in at noon today and I thought she was working, but she wasn't. Apparently she wasn't going to be until 1. So I was even about to sit down in the chair and everything because the way Great Clips is kind of just like all the car, like you go in and then, whoever's there will grab you unless you specifically request someone.
I don't, but
Yeah.
obviously.
Well, that's the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, Great. That's before your time, or after your time, rather. I was in the chair and I'm like, hey, who, Kelly, when is she going to be here? She's like, oh, she'll actually be here in an hour or so if you wanted to come back. So I did. I went out of my way to get a haircut multiple hours later and take a second trip up there because every time that she cuts my hair, it's fast, easy. She understands everything. We have a good rapport and a good conversation. And I wouldn't want to do it any other way. Always tip well and, come back. And when she sees, she's like, oh, it's so good to see you. Yeah. As though I'm her only client, even though she's my only, barber or whatever. She has seen, 8 people back to back before me is what she'd said. But, you still get that nice attention, which pays dividends for her, I imagine.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's part of that relationship.
Yeah.
For sales. And customers, I think it's important to note, at least in this particular situation, customers don't want to have to spend energy finding new vendors.
Mm-hmm.
So think about sales. If a customer is firing you as a company, there's energy and money that goes into finding new vendors.
Yeah.
So that's not to say that you shouldn't be building a relationship. That's to be saying if the vendor's firing you, there's probably a really good reason you should look into that. Of course, if you're firing a vendor, or not you're firing a vendor, but if you're firing a customer, then of course that customer probably should be rightfully concerned. Oh, why is this happening? They're going to have to spend more money to find time is money.
Yeah, you must be awfully complicated.
Exactly. And I'm the same thing. I may not be getting haircuts anymore. Yeah. And I do have someone specific that I use for the beard, but she and I have been friends for at least 4 years at this point. So that makes that choice relatively easy. You buy from your friends, right? But if my massage therapist, I don't like shifting massage therapists either, because the massage therapists that I use, male or female, they learn what I need. They learn what areas are typically very stressful for me. They also learn my physical activity and the quirks of what I do, whether it's standing up a lot during the day because I'm teaching or because of the lifting and whatnot that I'm doing. So I don't want to have to explain that to a new massage therapist at the same time. And I think that's a big deal for people who are getting this type of care. It doesn't seem like it's a lot. How much was your haircut?
It was $19.
Yeah. So men's haircuts are pretty cheap.
Yeah.
So even at that low risk, I remember when I was getting haircuts, it's 10 years ago. I think it was my last haircut, 10, 11 years ago. But when I moved to Florida from up north, that was one of my biggest headaches was, I've got to find a new hairstylist. And the person that I had gone to for years. And of course, the convenience of that was sit down. She knew exactly what to do with my hair. This is definitely a male-centric conversation, by the way, because I don't have the same.
No, I know. Well, for women, from my understanding, it's even more dramatic. My mom, when she has a stylist right now in our hometown, but at one point she had to change, or she dropped the one that she was working with because she just wasn't getting her hair right. And her hair's longer, more complicated, and she wants something more specific done with it than what I would. So it's almost even more important to build that relationship. The haircuts are longer. You get more face time with your clients / the vendor in that case. Yeah. And I would almost argue it's more important.
Probably.
Yeah.
But not probably, definitely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So where else have you seen this relationship matter as a customer?
So that's actually what I was thinking about when you were talking about your your massage therapist. Is I was going to physical therapy for a little bit. Actually, just recently graduated physical therapy. It's a big day. And I had to switch at one point, which I was really just really upset about because I had a physical therapist who was great, and I had to switch just for insurance reasons and switch to somebody through the university actually. And I was really nervous about that, but this relationship was even better, or just as good as the previous. And it took a little bit to build up, but there's no way that I would have went to anybody else by the time it was done. Where, if the schedule was packed, it's all wait. She was really good. She understood my lifestyle habits. What I valued is that I did a lot of research on my own for exercise that I could do at home to supplement it, ask questions. And she was really on top of that. Same thing with a primary care doctor. I just switched primary care doctors relatively recently. And that pays dividends in your health, like your day-to-day life, where let's say you have a certain medication or a certain condition where you're seeing your family medicine doctor and you need to have referrals to, specialists. Having that relationship where you can look them in the eye, they know who you are, and ask for something. It's so much more comfortable and you're more likely to get better care. And I think there's numbers on that as well about specifically primary care doctors, like the separation of people who have a family medicine doctor, a primary care doctor, versus those who don't, and the standard of care they end up receiving.
Well, I think there's especially when you're talking about care. So you're talking about, we're moving out of hair. Hair is not your health, but massage therapy, in my view, is preventative medicine. The physical therapy is obviously preventative medicine. Same thing with the doctor. So what is the value proposition that's being built over time that includes some of the stuff that we talked about in prior podcasts? The trust and the credibility that is part of what they do and how they do it, where they've gotten their degrees from, but also how they just listen to you and ask questions. Who wants to go to a doctor that doesn't really ask questions, right? I think even from the perspective of, I'm going into fiction on this one, Dr. House. So, and I've never watched a full show of Dr. House.
You're missing
but there are so many clips of him or of that show. And he still asks questions, but he's not likable. And it does cause friction between him and his customers, his patients, that sometimes causes them to be restrictive with the information. When if he was a little more likable, they might be more forthcoming with the information.
That's actually its own concept, because I really like House. I've seen the whole show through twice. And I think that it represents a whole other factor to lead generation and client, not retention, I guess, but more so client acquisition, where in the show, he typically doesn't do long-term care. It's, emergency cases where they're being treated, and it's like chronic conditions or, usually deadly conditions. And people come to him, there's a whole episode where they say he receives applications or referrals, like 100 of them every month or something like that. And he has to turn down like 99% of them because he doesn't have the time for it. And he also just doesn't care because he's, piece of shit. But he gets to skate off on the element of prestige, which goes a little bit in hand with trust and credibility, but in a very different way, where he has the credibility, he has the prestige of one of the best doctors, or, in the show, a diagnostician, but he doesn't have the trust and personal connection with the clients. Or by the time that it's done, the patients basically hate him like 75% of the time, but they're like, but you saved my life, so thank you.
Well, and I want to get into I hate to be the egghead professor on this. It's not so much the trust that he doesn't have. You can trust that he's going to be consistent. But he doesn't have the rapport build. He doesn't care to build rapport, but he doesn't need to build rapport. High demand, high demand, and low supply. It's just him, and he's got to sift through all of these potential customers. And I think you can see that with some brands that get pretty high on themselves and don't really care about that rapport build. There's and I don't know if this is related or not, because I've never watched her outside of maybe a clip or two, but there's a TikTok influencer, podcaster, that's deadpan interviews celebrities. And I don't...
That sounds kind of familiar.
And
Is it a BBC newscaster one?
I don't think so. Because of the quick rise.
Yeah.
And quick fall. And I think because of the deadpan, she became popular at first because she had that pull.
Yeah.
But apparently a fight with Drake or something like that is what ended up killing it for her. And what had happened, as you look at it, she never really built a substantial enough rapport with her audience and everything, because too quick, right?
Yeah.
Too quick. I don't care that much about this person. Whereas someone who might be more of a late night guest, like Ellen. Ellen came out that Ellen had this aspect of her personality that was very, very nasty.
Yeah, yeah.
But it took a lot more to finally break through that. And I don't know if it necessarily tracks, but I think, and House is also fiction. We have to
yeah.
House is also fiction at this.
Oh, yeah, it wouldn't fly in real life. You saw some of the full episodes.
No, he would be quickly sanctioned or something along.
Yeah.
Probably.
There's actually an episode where his malpractice insurance is like 3 times any other doctor or something like that. It's hilarious. That being said, kind of walking it back to what we were saying before, is every job like that where you have the client customer relationship, or rather, client principal relationship, where you have, in this case, a hairdresser / stylist and a massage therapist, it reveals that every job to a certain degree is sales.
Yes.
So I just got done reading a few months ago The Millionaire Real Estate Agent by George Keller. Do you have that in here? No. We'll link it in the description, but it's a book that's specifically focused on how to build a real estate business, but along the side of it, it's talking a lot about mindset, some of the stuff that we talk about, as well as what can be applied to other industries as well. And one of the biggest claims in the book is you have your job, and then you have a second job, which is lead generation. No matter what your A job is, or equally as important A job is lead generation, or else the business can't exist. And that would apply to, of course, every industry, but specifically these entrepreneurial ones, like a tattoo artist, same thing, where the hairdresser's renting out the space. As a doctor, you work for the hospital, but you are creating your clientele.
Yeah. So when it comes down to that lead generation, how are you doing it? Your word of mouth is the best type of lead generation that you could ever generate. And I guess first, let's go with this fictional House. His word of mouth is purely based on the fact that he can save people, despite the fact that he's a raging asshole.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, just to put it out there, that wouldn't generally work long term. You might be able to find some people who are able to pull that off. But generally speaking, I would never recommend that. As a salesperson, or as an entrepreneur, as someone who owns a business, the key thing is to, one, constantly be networking yourself. That matters, how you're going to get out there and talk to people, whether you're joining networking groups, whether you're joining certain social groups. That's one of the reasons I joined Toastmasters, was to be able to network myself. In addition to the skill building aspect of it, that's where you can join things like Kiwanis or, civic groups, which are unfortunately on the downfall in most of American society. That's to help you get your name out there. That's how I find most of my personal business, not by randomly prospecting. Although if I didn't have certain other things going on, that's what I would be doing. But it's a matter of how am I extending my network. Big part of extending my network is to just strike up conversations at bars or coffee shops, usually bars.
Yeah, not to focus on the alcohol too much there.
No, but when you're traveling, that's where your opportunities are. So if I'm traveling and I'm in an airport, I'm sitting at the bar, I'm not sitting at a table.
Yeah.
And I'll have a conversation with someone around me, especially if that person's by themselves, or if I'm in a lounge. So if I'm in the American Lounge or American Express Lounge, those people are usually, and they don't have kids with them, they're usually in some sort of business trip.
Yeah, exactly.
Are they part of a business that I'm going to be able to sell to at some point in time? How do I extend my network? How do I nurture those relationships even early on.
Well, that's actually very relevant to what we were talking about earlier in the sales meeting. With the new person, we were doing some sales training and practicing that rapport building, getting to know somebody, those first stages of building a relationship. And we did a few different scenarios, like what the type of approaches would be. And we started basically cold, where it's the first in-person meeting after several contacts through email and phone and whatnot. And there was a lot of trouble getting through that first phase of rapport building, like kind of breaking the ice and having that more personal conversation. And I don't know what you think about this, but what I had said was that the way I typically go about it in a scenario like that is you have the Ford model, right? Are we allowed to reference that?
Yeah, that's not, I don't think that's
okay. Yeah. So we have the Ford model for that, what do you call it? Rapport building questions, just to kind of keep you on track when it's a formula that shouldn't be adhered to too much or else it starts to sound robotic, but it's...
Well, and I'm not a big fan of it, to be honest.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I like it conceptually for just a parameter where if you're trying to think of things to talk about, I just think it's applicable to daily life. Like what are the 4 pillars that people like to talk about? They'll talk about their family, they'll talk about their job, their occupation, what they like to do for fun, the recreation, and things that they're looking forward to, their dreams. And I like it in that sense. But if you try to build a specific thing, like I need to ask a family question, occupation question, then I think it's a little railroady. But when you're going into this type of conversation where it's still effectively cold, your relationship is still new, it's really awkward no matter who you are to say, do you have any kids?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what the idea is there's different types of sales. So there's the type of sale, or rather relationship building, where you meet them at the airport lounge. And then there's the type of relationship building where you've set up a sales meeting to go and talk to them. And it's not like you're going to open with the exceptionally interpersonal rapport building questions. Right. You're going to say, oh, I saw on your LinkedIn that you've been doing this for like 10 years. How has that been? And peel the onion from there. And maybe you'll start to get a little bit more personal as the conversation goes on. But instead of looking at it as, I need to step into this person's guard and get on their good side, it's, I am me, and I've learned a little bit about them, and I want to actually build a relationship with them, become friends with them. If you're in a bar, it's a different setting. You have a social lubricant, you're kind of on the off time, and you're sitting there, maybe they show you a picture on their phone of some sort of family trip, and then, you talk about the family a little bit. And it's a whole different environment. I think that the Ford model, or that concept, kind of implies that those are of equal value, or they can be equally applied in different the same circumstance, but it's not the case. It's utilizing the current environment, the conversation that you're having, to build a relationship in the most appropriate way.
So some time ago, I had a conversation with someone, and I was of the opinion beforehand that you need to have a decent rapport build in order to really make a good sale.
Yeah.
And this individual convinced me otherwise. And very, very successful salesperson. He says, I don't bother with rapport.
Yeah.
Now, he's probably still asking questions about their business.
Yeah.
And what he's probably doing is he's just keeping rapport as professional as possible.
Yeah.
But he looked at it as a waste of time. And the more I thought about it, the more I see rapport, especially when it comes out formulaically, the Ford model, as overdone. So now you might sit in someone's office and say, oh, wow, I see that you've just won a golf championship. I guess you like golf. Maybe you'll talk about golf for a little bit. But my view is, at least early in a business relationship, you want to build only professional rapport.
Yeah.
It's a little, I can't think of the word right now, but it borders, I guess, on stalkerish or creepy or something when you're like, so tell me about your family, or are you married? Why? Why is that even important for talking about the business?
Especially when that's not why you're there.
Yeah.
You made a reason to be there.
But if you're doing your due diligence to research the company, you can say, well, I saw on your LinkedIn, blah.
Yeah.
Okay, so they don't have a LinkedIn. Well, they have a position at the organization.
Yeah.
Tell me, what do you like working here? Or tell me a little bit about why you like working here, as an example. That's rapport build, but it's professional. Tell me, about your coworkers, if you want to get into that. I've heard someone talk about, that's just basically Ford, but the corporate family, the corporate objectives, the corporate, what do you do for fun around here on lunch break?
Yeah.
That's the recreation aspect of it. but you're still keeping it fairly professional. And I know at least one company, in fact, I'm drinking out of their glass right now, Gartner, they don't appreciate that type of stuff.
Yeah.
At least in the cold calls. Now, my contacts with Gartner, I do have interpersonal rapport with them, but that's only after the relationship has been developed.
Exactly. Well, that's the whole idea, is you also have to be mindful of your existing relationship. Like, why are you there? It's as if you're making a new friend. That's how I like to view it anyway, where if you're trying to make a sale, you're trying to make a new friend.
Yeah.
And it's not like you were to meet somebody, you're making a new friend in general. Like, outside of a business context, maybe you're at a movie, you're sitting next to each other for whatever reason, which that's not the best example, but you're just at a bar and you meet somebody at a bar and you end up chatting and becoming friends. It's not like you're going to open up with their deepest, darkest secrets. It's you're at a certain level of comfort and position in the relationship, and you work off of that, especially if you want to continue being friends. If you decide after you begin to talk to a potential client that you want the relationship to continue, it's a one-to-one analogy, I would say. And I like to say it is like sales is making friends the job, where you go in and you sit down, you build that relationship from the professional perspective. I think doing anything else is disingenuous.
Right.
You come in and sit down, you know you're here to make a sale. They know you're here to make a sale. And if you go off and say, so did you catch the game last night, without any other reason of hopping into it, it just comes across as disingenuous. It sounds false, as opposed to opening up with the real reason there's to talk about the business. You make the sale, you begin to develop the relationship, and you get to know each other. Say, oh, they tell you about what their kids are doing. Say, oh, how did that go? Or how did their sports tournament go, or something? That's where those types of conversations come from.
And I'll bet your hairstylist, taking this back to the original part, your hairstylist probably didn't start off by asking you about your girlfriend, which would be really weird. Right?
Exactly, yeah.
All hairstylist is to tell you about do you have a girlfriend? Are you hitting on me? Like, if I say yes, are you going to up the middle of my head? But I'm sure that over time, you divulged more information. I'm sure she divulged more information as they got to know. Same thing with my massage therapist. First interactions, obviously an extremely vulnerable situation in, sitting on a table with no clothes on, with just strategically placed blankets, that would be completely inappropriate to say, do you have a boyfriend? And flip the genders. It gets weirder, right? Sure. But over time, those things will come out in the conversations in between. Okay, how does this feel? This feels like you've got adhesion here. I'm going to try and work it out. Sorry if it hurts. I need to stretch this. Can I do that? And so it's built into that general professional area that you happen to be. So the caution there is, of course, for our listeners, as you're building rapport, don't just jump into, hi, are you married? But you still need to develop those relationships, because those relationships are integral into building the trust and credibility and rapport that'll allow them to talk about the vulnerable parts of their business.
And on that, not every relationship is created the same.
No.
And I think that while a more interpersonal relationship is nearly always better, not all relationships are going to end up looking like that, where you have a long-term business relationship, you have an ongoing client-principal dynamic. It's not like there might be some people in your pipeline that just want to talk about business. You don't even know what their partner's name is or what their kid's name is, and that's just as acceptable if that's what the relationship calls for. Is it better to be on a more personal note? Probably, for retention purposes. But if it's not what is in the cards for the relationship, then it's not also.
And I think elephant in the room, I think I have the everything disc thing here. Knowing how to navigate different personalities will help you navigate whether or not you can develop more interpersonal rapport. So if you look at the disc assessment and disc personality profiles, you've got that dominant, someone who could be in the middle of dominant and interpersonal. You've got the interpersonal. You've got the I always blank on the S&C for some reason, the stable one, and the conscientious. And when it comes to these four personalities, they would approach rapport differently as a customer. So, and I'm going to focus primarily on DI, because they're the ones that are usually going to be leading organizations, to be quite honest. So you got that dominant personality is probably not going to need or even want rapport all that much. And in fact, as a more skeptical individual, they may look at rapport as ingratiation.
Yeah.
So, but on the I side, you may have to have that type of rapport, and they may welcome that type of rapport in order to develop the relationship. And it might be important for them to buy from people who demonstrate a relationship approach, as opposed to someone on that D domain, if you will, that dominant domain, who's going to care more about the results of what you're going to drive. So you've got to make sure you're getting there quickly.
I hear that. I think that that's the big thing that I do end up liking about the DISC model, is kind of highlighting those key differences, because I'm of the opinion that a lot of things like that, it's really hard to quantify and put it in boxes. But I think having it on the tip of your tongue, or your consciousness when you're going into a conversation is important.
Yeah.
Like, is this the type of person who wants to have an extended conversation? Is this the type of person who doesn't?
Right.
And it kind of gets the ball rolling. I think if you marry to stuff like that, it can be complicated. But in the most raw form, the most human form, even if you don't know what DISC means in this case for you, the listeners out there, it's about feeling those social cues. Do they seem like they're bored with the conversation? Do they seem like they don't want to be talking about their personal life right now?
Right.
Build the relationship around what both of you want to get out of it. And if you're not doing that, then you're not making a friend either.
Right. And it's going to be leveraging your emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Reading the room, if you will, and making sure that you that you're adaptable to your customer's personality. Don't expect the customer to be adapted to your personality.
Yeah. You want to come with a good haircut as well.
At least you have more options. All right. So there we have it. A little bit about personality, a little bit about building those relationships, regardless of the industry that you happen to be on or be in. Excuse me. Brian, any final thoughts or quotes?
You get your haircut and have it be good.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do it every week. We'll see you next time.